but Harvick knew this was his chance. This is his chance for a championship. He's got such a great season that is on the line right here, right now in this race. If he can't get below, or he can't get above the cut line, his championship hopes go away. All those 9 wins were great to celebrate at the time, but they don't mean anything if he can't get out of this race and get into the championship 4.
It's November 1st, 2020. We're at the Martinsville Speedway in Martinsville, Virginia for the Xfinity 500. It's the 9th race in the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs, and the final race in the round of 8. Kevin Harvick has been the class of the field all season long. He has scored 9 wins, 20 top 5s, 27 top 10s, and an average finish of 7.3. To say that this has been one of the most dominant seasons in NASCAR history would be an understatement. Harvick won his first Cup Series championship in 2014 and would go on to make the championship 4 in 4 of the next 5 seasons. Many people believe that Harvick will not only make the championship 4 in 2020, but that he'll go into Phoenix as the driver to beat. After all, he has won the most races and has been the most consistent all season long. By all metrics, this is a championship caliber season. His name was being engraved onto the Bill France Cup, and it looked like he had his second championship in the bag. Kevin Harvick is the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series champion. Unfortunately, the bright lights of the NASCAR playoffs make it so much easier to see when everything goes wrong. If you're a NASCAR fan, you already know how this story ends. Kevin Harvick blew a 42-point lead over the cut line in the penultimate race of the season and somehow missed the championship 4. What you are about to witness over the course of however long this video ends up being is the biggest collapse in NASCAR playoff history. This is the story of how the most dominant driver of the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series season ended up choking in crunch time. When the elimination-style playoff format was created in 2014, Martinsville had always been the first race in the round of 8, and the 1-mile Phoenix Raceway had always been the elimination race in the round of 8. That all changed on March 26, 2019, when NASCAR released the 2020 Cup Series schedule. Homestead Miami Speedway, which had served as the host of Championship Weekend since 2002, was moved into the regular season, which meant that Phoenix would take over Homestead's old spot as the host of Championship Weekend. This also meant that Martinsville would take over Phoenix's old spot as the elimination race for the round of 8. The 2020 NASCAR Cup Series season was a season like no other, and not in a good way, because just 4 races into the season, the sport was hit with a massive curveball. On March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared that COVID-19, aka the coronavirus, was a global pandemic. The world as we knew it completely shut down, and sports were no different. NASCAR had initially announced that the Atlanta and Homestead race weekends would go forward as scheduled, but without fans in the stands. But as the situation surrounding the pandemic worsened, NASCAR announced that all race events through May 3rd had been postponed. NASCAR would resume its season at Darlington Raceway on May 17th without fans in the stands. It was also announced that with the exception of the Coca-Cola 600, practice and qualifying would be cancelled from Darlington through Homestead, and then on July 21st it was announced that practice and qualifying would be cancelled for the remainder of the season. The races were now one-day shows. The drivers would travel to the track on race day, and they would get in their cars and race, and what they had is what they had. We are going to put a big old pin in that because that fact is going to be very important later on. When NASCAR returned from its 2-month break, Harvick would turn on the jets. He won the first race back at Darlington and followed it up with wins at Atlanta Atlanta, Pocono, Indianapolis, both Michigan races, and Dover. Harvick's dominant regular season performance not only made him the odds-on championship favorite, it also ensured that he would easily run away with the regular season championship, which netted him an additional 15 playoff points. Which means that when the playoffs began, Harvick had a whopping 67 playoff points. Harvick's dominant season would extend into the playoffs as he would win the Southern 500, and then he would score another win 2 weeks later at the Bristol Night Race. By this point in the season, Harvick appeared to be absolutely unstoppable. He had 9 wins, he had a huge amount of playoff points in the bank, and most importantly, he had all of the momentum in the world. Kevin was poised to win the championship and nothing was going to stand in his way. And then the round of 8 happened. Harvick had the car to beat at Kansas, but was beat off pit road late in the race by Joey Logano. As the laps wound down, he did everything that he could to pass Logano, but he couldn't make it happen due to the massive amounts of dirty air that was generated by the 550 horsepower rules package that was being used at the time. So even though Harvick had the faster car, he couldn't pass Logano, which in my opinion was both thrilling and frustrating. Logano would clinch his championship 4 berth by winning the race, while Harvick came in second. The following week at Texas, Harvick had another strong car and was leading the race until he crashed into the outside wall due to the track being hit by a sizable amount of mist. The crash would relegate him to a disappointing 16th place finish, while Kyle Busch went on to win, but because Busch had been eliminated from the playoffs in the previous round, none of the remaining playoff drivers that were not named Joey Logano were able to punch their ticket to Phoenix. So going into Martinsville, Harvick had a 42-point lead over 5th place driver Alex Bowman. So as long as he had a decent day and didn't completely shit the bed, he would be racing for his second championship in Phoenix. The only way it is theoretically possible for Harvick to miss the championship 4 is if he had a monumental collapse and Chase Elliott drove the race of his career and went on to win. But the likelihood of that happening is so low, it may as well be the equivalent of purchasing a Super Bowl ticket. There is absolutely no way that the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series champion can blow a 42-point lead over the cut line in the penultimate race of the season. All Harvick had to do in order to secure his 6th championship 4 berth was to have a decent day and avoid any sort of catastrophe. What could possibly go wrong? Harvick's seemingly insurmountable 42-point lead would evaporate in just 3 laps, as Martin Truex Jr. would take the lead, which put him 3 points below the cut line. He also dropped from 6th to 10th in the opening laps, which isn't great, but I must remind you all that it's a 500-lap race, and anything can happen in that time, so there's no reason to panic just yet. For some strange reason, Harvick's crew chief Rodney Childers is talking about the importance of scoring stage points, which is baffling to me because they've had one of the most dominant seasons in NASCAR history and are practically guaranteed to have a championship 4 berth.
Had a chance to visit with his crew chief Rodney Childers this morning, Dave, and he kind of laughed at everyone saying, hey, we're advanced to Phoenix. He said, you know what, as great as our regular season was and the playoffs have been for us, we're not automatically advanced. We have to gain stage points today, and you see that on the left-hand side of your screen. Obviously, as soon as the 19 took the lead, Harvick immediately jumped down to the bottom of the leaderboard. Right now, he's just +5 above the cut line, and yes, he's accurate. They do need stage points today as we watch Chase Elliott and the 2-car Brad Keselowski battle for 4th, guys.
A competition caution would come out on lap 61, with Truex Jr. in the lead and Chase Elliott in second. These 2 drivers came into this race facing a must-win situation, and so far they have dominated this race, which is not what Harvick wanted to see. You want to know what else isn't good for Harvick right now? His car is, for lack of a better term, awful.
This thing is rough. I mean, bad. Taking off, won't turn, sliding the back. 10-4.
Harvick and Rodney Childers will tell you, Rick, this is not their best racetrack in the playoffs, but Rodney told me, listen, we put more work into this race maybe than any other playoff race, and hopefully they're hoping anyway that work pays off today. And Harvick, who won the regular season title, now that close to the cut line, guys, just amazing.
Elliott would retake the lead, and now Harvick was only 2 points above the cut line, but Denny Hamlin would come to the rescue and pass Elliott for the lead with 10 laps to go in stage 1. That pass put Harvick back above the cut line, but only by a mere 10 points. Hamlin would go on to win stage 1 while Harvick finished 14th. There is no need to hit the panic button. There is still a long way to go. There is no possible way that Kevin can choke in crunch time. For all intents and purposes, his championship hopes are still alive at this point in time. Kurt Busch would take the lead on lap 143, and Harvick is now 6 points below the cut line. The deficit would be cut down to just 2 points, but that was a hollow victory because Harvick was continuing to go backwards, as he had dropped all the way back to 25th. To put into perspective how awful Harvick's day has been up until this point, he started the race 6th, finished 14th in stage 1, started 24th in stage 2, and is now 25th. And all of that happened in just 2 stages. What's making matters worse is the fact that Harvick's car is still the equivalent of a toilet after a late night trip to Taco Bell.
Absolutely. Killed it through the center of the corner. Won't take off, won't turn, no grip on exit. Too tight through the whole center of the corner, and then it's got the slide sideways at the 5/8 3/4 mark.
Yeah, I would say Rodney Childers has his hands full. So on that last stop, they did several changes. That's why Harvick is so far back in the field, including pulling a spring rubber from the right rear spring. But, man, they have a long way to go. And you guys mentioned it now with the one up front leading the race, Kevin Harvick below the cut line, -2. Who would have thought that coming into Martinsville?
Elliott would retake the lead on lap 163. In other news, Harvick is now 2 points above the cut line, but it doesn't matter because he's all the way back in 24th, and he can't make up any ground due to the poor handling of his car. Harvick's horrible, no good, very bad day got even worse when he had to pit under green due to a flat tire he received after contact with Matt Kenseth. Pitting under green is a metaphorical death sentence at Martinsville, due to the fact that the track is only a half-mile long. So if a driver has to pit under green, they will lose at least 2 laps. Okay, now it's time to hit the panic button. Luckily for Harvick, a caution would come out and he was able to get one of his laps back. All he has to do is get into the free pass position as the first car 1 lap down and hope another caution comes out so he can get back on the lead lap. Harvick would battle Cup Series rookie John Hunter Nemechek for the free pass position, but Nemechek would put on his best Gandalf impression and would not let him pass, because as it turns out, he doesn't care that Harvick's season is on the line. He's trying to get back on the lead lap so he can get the best finish possible for his team and sponsors, because there are 39 drivers on the track instead of just 8. Harvick would give Kenseth the bumper as payback for the flat tire that put him 2 laps down. It's important to mention that this is not the first time that Kenseth has been at the center of major championship implications at Martinsville. Another caution came out, but Harvick would not get the free pass because Timmy Hill, who just so happened to be the last car on the lead lap, had just been lapped by Elliott. Elliott would retake the lead on lap 240. As for Harvick, he was now Michael Jordan below the cut line. Elliott would go on to win stage 2, while Harvick did not receive the free pass. In other news, grass is green, water is wet, and the sky is blue. The handling on Harvick's car is still a disaster, which I feel is perfectly emblematic of the year 2020 as a whole.
Anything help? Anything? No. Nothing's helped. Haven't done anything to make it better, just made it tighter as far as the forward bike goes.
Listen, this is a championship team. Rodney Childers, a championship crew chief. Clearly, Kevin Harvick, a Hall of Famer. But you can hear in that radio conversation a little frustration starting to creep in. And, Jeff, who could blame Kevin Harvick, right? Here he is stuck all evening long. And, by the way, he's raced around these same cars. Even when he's been in position to get a lap back, he's been around these same cars that are running 23rd to 28th. I think even if they get the lap back, I'm not sure Harvick has a car to run up in the top 10 today.
If you're a NASCAR fan, you probably think that this playoff format is an absolute farce that has absolutely no place in any form of motorsports. And what makes matters even worse is the fact that NASCAR on NBC play-by-play announcer Rick Allen decides to twist the knife even more when he brings up the possibility of Harvick being eliminated.
But Harvick knew this was his chance. This is his chance for a championship. He's got such a great season that is on the line right here, right now in this race. If he can't get below or he can't get above the cut line, his championship hopes go away. All those 9 wins were great to celebrate at the time, but they don't mean anything if he can't get out of this race and get into the championship 4.
Another caution comes out, and once again Harvick does not receive the free pass. The racing gods are just being cruel at this point. When will this cruel torment ever end? Apparently it's going to end thanks to a pit road penalty that was given to Elliott due to the fact that his jackman went over the wall too soon, so that means he will have to go to the back of the field. To say that this penalty is a devastating blow to the most dominant race of his career up until this point would be the understatement of the year. Did I say that he was going to the back of the field because of a pit road penalty? It turned out that the penalty was a lie. Elliott's jackman knew that he went over the wall too soon, so he reset his position by jumping back onto the wall and then jumping back over it to perform his service. In other words, the jackman had made an honest attempt to reset his position after realizing he had made a mistake, so NASCAR decided to throw Elliott and his team a bone by rescinding the penalty against them. Elliott would get to keep his dominant track position and would not have to go to the back of the field. And yes, if you're wondering, that is an actual rule in NASCAR. After what seemed like an eternity, things would finally start to go Harvick's way, as he would pass Bubba Wallace for the free pass position. He is now the first car 1 lap down. All he has to do is hold on to that position and hope another caution comes out, and wouldn't you know it, on lap 401 the caution comes out, and Harvick would finally be able to get back on the lead lap. A crisis has been averted, and Harvick's season is officially saved. What I just said will not age poorly in the next few minutes. Truex Jr. would retake the lead with 92 laps to go. Harvick is now 6 points above the cut line due to the fact that Brad Keselowski was sent to the back of the field due to a pit road speeding penalty. Harvick will be in good shape to advance as long as Elliott or Truex Jr. don't win the race. With 44 laps to go, Harvick's worst nightmare has come to life, as Elliott has not only retaken the lead, but he has begun to run away from the field. Elliott was 25 points below the cut line going into this race and needed a borderline miracle to have any shot of advancing to the championship 4. That borderline miracle that everyone thought was impossible when the day started is now on the verge of becoming true. As the laps wind down, it's become increasingly obvious that Elliott will advance to the championship 4 with a clutch victory, which means that the last 2 spots will come down to Hamlin, Keselowski, and Harvick. With 5 laps to go, Harvick passes Matt DiBenedetto and is now only 1 point below the cut line. The poor soul occupying the position that he needs to be in is his old nemesis, Kyle Busch. If Harvick passes Busch, there will be a 3-way tie at the cut line, and Harvick will get the tiebreaker because he has the best overall finish in the round of 8. Elliott takes the checkered flag and wins the Xfinity 500. Keselowski finishes 4th, Hamlin finishes 11th, and now we wait on Kevin Harvick. This is it. An entire season's worth of effort has come down to this. When the race began 499 laps ago, Harvick was in the catbird seat. On lap 500, Harvick is going to have to do something drastic in order to save his season. He has been the most dominant driver of the season. He has been the most consistent driver of the season. He has the best average finish of the season. At the age of 44, he has had a season that most drivers dream of, and now that season is on the line right here, right now. He is 1 position away from championship 4 berth number 6. He is also a spin out or wreck away from elimination and a 5th place points finish. Let's take a dance with Lady Chaos and see what happens. Welcome to a moment in history.
The final turn. He needs the position.
Oh, Harvick spins the 18.
Turns into the 18. He turns as well. The 18 crosses the start-finish line, and Harvick is going to be out of the playoffs.
You blew it, boy. You really blew it.
You blew it. You had it all and you blew it.
You blew it. You blew it.
You blew it.
You're probably wondering how it was possible for Kevin Harvick to collapse so spectacularly in just one race. A lot of people were quick to blame the flawed and imperfect playoff format as the sole reason for his collapse, but I'm not going to do that because in my opinion, it's not actually true. In reality, there were a multitude of factors that caused Harvick to miss the championship 4. As I've mentioned before, Harvick went into Martinsville with a 42-point lead over the cut line. He somehow managed to lose 34 points in just one race, and his last act of desperation had failed, which ultimately relegated him to a 17th place finish. And when it was all said and done, he missed the championship 4 by just 8 points. He had been mired in the back of the pack for most of the race due to an ill-handling car, and because of that, he had lost a ton of ground that he was unable to make up. There was also the fact that he did not collect any stage points in the race, which proved to be the deciding factor between himself, Hamlin, and Keselowski. Since 2017, NASCAR Cup Series races had been split into 3 stages. At the end of the first 2 stages, the drivers that finished in the top 10 would receive stage points, with first place receiving 10 stage points and 1 playoff point, while 10th place receives just 1 stage point. Hamlin collected 18 stage points while Keselowski collected 14. If Harvick had been able to successfully complete his pass on Kyle Busch, there would have been a 3-way tie between them, with Hamlin advancing and Harvick winning the tiebreaker over Keselowski due to the fact that he had the best overall finish in the round of 8. Do you want to know what that finish was?
Harvick stays up high, also lap traffic in front of him. Through 3 and 4 for the final time. Joey Logano's going to win again in 2020, this time Kansas.
Oh, yeah!
And he is secured the championship 4 again.
Out of all the factors I've mentioned so far, I personally believe that the cancellation of practice and qualifying was the most detrimental factor in Harvick's collapse. For most of the season, the lack of practice and qualifying didn't affect Harvick and the Ford team, because they were consistently bringing fast cars each and every week. But the cold hard reality of NASCAR is the fact that a team is not going to perfectly nail the setup on their cars every single week. There are some weeks where a team completely misses the setup, and they are forced to endure a weekend of pain and misery. Unfortunately for Harvick and his team, their luck would run out at the worst possible moment. If the COVID-19 pandemic doesn't happen, then the season wouldn't have been forced to go on hiatus for 2 months. And if that doesn't happen, practice and qualifying would have gone on as scheduled, which means that Harvick's team would have been able to realize how awful the car was, and they would have been able to make adjustments in time for the race on Sunday. But because there was no practice and qualifying, they were unable to realize how awful the car was until it was too late, and it was this bad date with Lady Luck that would cost them a shot at a championship. The day after Martinsville, NASCAR announced that they were investigating an incident between Erik Jones and Denny Hamlin. In the closing laps of the race, Hamlin's car had begun to fade and he was steadily losing positions. His teammate at the time, Erik Jones, could have passed him, but if he did that, Hamlin would have been eliminated. So he decided to be a good teammate and stay behind him, or to be more technically accurate, his team explicitly ordered him to stay behind Hamlin in order to ensure that he would get into the championship 4. Some people genuinely believe that Joe Gibbs Racing was deliberately manipulating the outcome of the race in order to ensure that their only shot at the 2020 championship wasn't eliminated. This incident, if you can even call it that, turned out to be a complete nothing burger because NASCAR announced that they would not be pursuing any further action, which makes sense because unless the incident in question is a blatantly egregious example of race manipulation, like in the case of Spingate, team orders are technically not against the rules in NASCAR. Harvick would ultimately finish 5th in the final point stand-ins. It was a disappointing end to a fantastic season, and the fact that he didn't even get the chance to race for a championship, despite the fact that he was both dominant and consistent, was a bitter pill to swallow for most NASCAR fans. Speaking of which, I wonder who won that Mickey Mouse-style championship anyway. Harvick would shrug off his Martinsville collapse by going winless in 2021, which marked the first time since 2009 that he failed to win a race. His most defining moment of the season was his feud with defending champion Chase Elliott, and I am proud to report that his quest for payback against the most popular driver in the sport ended in the most spectacular way possible. He would finish 5th in points like he had done the year before, but that's as much of a compliment as saying Cars 3 is a marginally better movie than Cars 2. By the way, Kyle Larson would make his grand return to the sport by winning 10 races. The only difference is that he actually made it to the championship 4, and he actually finished the job and won the championship. 2022, for the most part, has been the same old song and dance. He did manage to snap a 65 race winless streak by winning at Michigan, and would follow it up with a win at Richmond the very next week. After back-to-back wins, everyone began to believe that he was a legitimate championship threat. Unfortunately, that optimism has turned out to be a bigger lie than the Ark of the Covenant. He finished 33rd at Darlington because his car caught on fire due to crappy-ass parts. Those are his words, not mine. And then he finished dead last at Kansas after his car slammed into the outside wall because Bubba Wallace had slid up in front of him. These two DNFs put him behind the 8 ball going into Bristol, as he was 35 points below the cut line and was in a must-win situation. He was in the top 5 all night long and was solidly in contention to get his 3rd win of the season and advance to the next round. Unfortunately, his pit crew would botch the final pit stop and he lost all of his track position and he was effectively taken out of contention. While he would finish 10th, it ultimately wasn't good enough, as he would be one of the first 4 drivers to be eliminated from the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. In the span of just 3 seasons, Kevin Harvick has gone from capping off his most dominant season ever by choking in the penultimate race of the season, to going winless in 2021 and being completely humiliated by Chase Elliott, to a first-round playoff exit. If this doesn't rank among the saddest collapses in sports history, then quite frankly, I don't know what does. When Kevin Harvick missed the championship 4, many NASCAR fans wanted the current elimination-style playoff format to be completely abolished. In their eyes, it made no logical sense that the best driver of the 2020 season wouldn't even get a shot to compete for a championship, even though he had the most dominant season of his career. Kevin's shocking elimination, alongside a multitude of other controversial incidents over the years, made the playoff format completely unsalvageable in the eyes of most NASCAR fans. While it was heartbreaking that one of the most dominant seasons in NASCAR history wasn't rewarded with a championship, the format is ultimately not to blame for that fact. I want to make it abundantly clear that the current playoff format should not be absolved from any sort of criticism. There are many legitimate things you can criticize the format for, and it should be criticized in the right instances. A driver and his team getting eliminated because they failed to show up when it really mattered is not one of them. Harvick didn't get eliminated because he got wrecked by someone that was completely irrelevant to the championship picture, and he wasn't sidelined because of an engine or mechanical failure. If he got eliminated by either one of those things, then blaming the format would have made sense, because he would have gotten screwed over due to factors that were out of his control, but that simply wasn't the case in this instance. He had opportunities at both Kansas and Texas to punch his ticket to Phoenix, but in both instances, he came up short due to circumstances that were completely out of his control. You can excuse what happened at Kansas and Texas, but you simply cannot excuse what happened at Martinsville. Harvick's unexpected collapse and subsequent elimination was entirely self-inflicted. His car was terrible from the moment the green flag dropped. He was a lap down for most of Stage 2 and a good portion of Stage 3, which cost him a ton of points, and he didn't collect a single stage point in the entirety of the race. And even though he was able to get back on the lead lap and made a furious charge in the closing laps, his last act of desperation failed and he got shut out completely. Keep in mind that he won the regular season championship, which gave him an extra 15 playoff points, in addition to all of the points he got from winning races and stages throughout the course of the season, and And we also can't forget the fact that he went into this race with a 42-point lead over the cut line, and somehow he still managed to find a way to completely squander the advantage he had built up all season long, and he ended up paying for it by not being able to compete for the sport's biggest prize. While it sucks that his season had to end like that, I personally believe that it wasn't unfair because his collapse was not caused by a fluke circumstance based on the current playoff format. There are many NASCAR fans that don't recognize Chase Elliott as the 2020 champion and vehemently believe that Kevin Harvick is the actual champion because of the incredible season that he had. And to those people, I have to ask one very simple question. Can you really say that Kevin Harvick is the 2020 NASCAR Cup Series champion if he never got a chance to race for that title in the first place?